All right, we are back. Another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks with my good friend, Mr. Onchain Lara. We are well into the hundreds now, episode 103. A lot to get to. The one story breaking through for me in the past 48 hours, we got Alexis Ohanian putting in a bid, throwing his name in for the acquisition of TikTok, promising to bring the app on chain and give it to the American people. We've got Doge ETF approvals. We've got SEC dropping investigations against none other than the Bored Apes, Yuga Labs, no longer under SEC investigation. It's hot flying into March, and everything is financial advice.
It turns out everything is on sale because the buy the news, sell the rumor, or buy the rumor, sell the news, depending on literally which way the yin and the yang are turned, which way the Pisces fish are swimming. This is the month of March. This is the Pisces month. It's hard to know, just like the Pisces, the Pisces icon, which fish is leading and which fish is following. That's to me, Michael, right now. I don't know what is following. Is the news following the rumor, or is the rumor following the news? Because the market's following both.
It is very, very confusing. We're going...
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Onchain Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
Ups and downs. It moves from blood in the streets, blows, to touching back up above 100K within 48 hours. President Trump now resorting to Sunday night tweets to maybe in some ways give them a little bit more runway through these weeks. We cover the news cycle in week in and week out now for hundreds of episodes, and typically we would see news get buried into Friday nights. We would see headlines on Mondays, so that they sort of trickle through the news cycle. We would do recordings here on Tuesdays to try to catch it. Now, even all that game is out the window when Trump is tweeting about the digital asset strategic reserve. And I chose those words carefully because in his first tweet announcing this thing on Sunday night, he left out Bitcoin and then had to literally reply to his own tweet to thread of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum, as well as other cryptos that I find valuable. Basically, markets soared back up after that bounce. What my thought? Well, let me get your take on this, and I'll tell you where I think it's going.
So my take, just as you were setting it up, we've been watching Friday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. How is the SEC.gov site going to bury the story? Well, they're going to put it up on the Friday before the Super Bowl. Like we find these patterns. Now, this pattern is the one that seems strange because, as you said, this isn't about press releases. This is about tweeting/X posting on Sunday. And the timing of it, if you look at it, is what happens in the crypto markets, just the timing of it. Crypto markets are starting to swing up and down with what most people who follow the space would think of as the natural bumps and retracements that you're expecting if you look at the technical analysis of a lot of these projects. Like Bitcoin retracing 20% is really not that out of the ordinary given the current run past 100K. But what is interesting is that markets start to tumble when you say things like, hey, I'm going to insult the president of Ukraine on national TV on Saturday or whenever that was, on Friday. And you're going to start to see markets swing down. Well, if you know you're about to announce a whole bunch of tariffs against everyone, you want to say Canada, you want to say Mexico, say China, say everybody, the UK. If you're going to start to do that, a rational person who watches American markets might say, well, if you announce that as America, you might cause markets to go down. So if you know that there's going to be a whole bunch of announcements that could cause markets to go down, wouldn't it be nice if you could just tweet an announcement in between that literally jacked up crypto markets, in some cases like 50% to 70%. And you did that with a tweet just so you can roll into the week and tank the markets again with more bad news. So to me, it feels like pure manipulation. Just play the game. Don't give too much bad news too fast. Throw the little good newses in there to keep the market bumping up and down.
That's it. I mean, that is the entire take of what I was going to say. We've been covering these ups and downs, these bumps along the way, the price action in Bitcoin, these giant swings, the FUD in the market. And that is exactly what, the last few weeks of February as we enter March have felt like, that you can't tell which way is up, because it's like the headline is Bitcoin crashes, Bitcoin's up 10%. The stock market, the actual NYSE and the NASDAQ falls 10%, 20%, but the next day it's up. You literally can't make heads or tails of which way the market is going at any given point. And then when I go look at the fundamentals, specifically on Bitcoin chart, it's still within a bullish range. We're getting into some weird territory, but it's bouncing here between 80 and 100. As you say, everything feels like it's just on a 20% discount. Every time there is some blood in the streets, it's like, okay, we're definitely going back to 100K. Meanwhile, you've got Michael Saylor out there saying, like, sell the kidney, but do not sell your Bitcoin. I mean, this guy is going to the extremes, telling people, like, we're going to the moon one way or another. This thing is going up and to the right over time, maybe faster than you and I even can predict. If we get some clarity here, likely this week, on Bitcoin and Ethereum included in a strategic reserve. We got to unpack this a little bit, because he tweets out, he leaves out the two, gold and silver. He talks about XRP, Solana, and ADA. Cardano makes the cut. I don't know anybody building on Cardano, but these guys now apparently included. And then Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, has to be the adult in the room here. He's literally playing the mature crypto guy. Actually, I think Bitcoin, he said, is probably the only appropriate digital currency that to be included. He knows better. You can't put XRP, which is highly centralized, and they can print as much of it as they want. There's an infinite supply. You can't put that into a strategic reserve. It doesn't function the way you need it to function there, Trump. So who knows what's going to happen, but no doubt that conversation is happening this week on Capitol Hill. The A16s of the world, the Peter Thiels of the world, the Brian Armstrongs, these guys are going at it for who and how much is going to get included in this strategic reserve.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it better. The very obvious omission of the two currencies that I think most people would say would make the most sense if you were to only pick one or two. You pick one, you pick Bitcoin. You pick two, you might pick Bitcoin and Ethereum just because of pure, volume. But then to list off all these other ones, well, just for our listeners, what is it about these other cryptocurrencies, aside from the fact that they're, quote, in the top 10 or top 20, if you look at most sites out there, from CoinMarketCap to CoinGecko, these different sites that basically track all cryptocurrencies. Remember, there's more than 11 million of them, but there is of top 20, no matter how many you have. And in this top 20, these coins that we just rattled off happen to be. That's one thing they have in common. What's the second thing they have in common? All those nerds from the inauguration who were in the rotunda, smiling, sitting there next to the new president, those are all the people who are the CEOs and or primary investors in the projects, in the coins that were just named. Cardano. It couldn't be more of a dead, trashy blockchain that at one point was supposed to be for scientists and for research. And there was all of this, this benevolence that was exuding from it. We're going to go and we're going to help West African countries rebuild their identity platforms for either driver's licenses or for education for students. Remember, on Cardano, it was like, wow, these guys are really nice guys. They're gonna help out all of these developing nations. Now, we say that out of one side of our mouth, but we also know out of the other side of our mouth what are companies that often try to help developing nations by forcing technology on them. What are they often called? Well, they're often called economic hitmen, and they're from the IMF or the World Bank, and they're like, hey, we're so sorry your DMV sucks. We're going to give you this blockchain called Cardano. But why is the token called ADA? You don't have to ask. It just is. It just is. It was his ex-wife. Forget it. Anyway, you just have this this confusing story. But the only reason that is even being mentioned in the same breath as Solana, which again is Andreessen Horowitz, and or being in the same breath as what's the other one? XRP.
Ripple.
And Ripple, which is basically a centralized bank's new way to manage, transacting value and avoiding SWIFT and ACH delays for giving somebody cash. It's all stuff that Bitcoin can do. Let's leave that for a second. But I'm kind of thinking like there's either one or two things happen. Either, it's probably a combination of both, but I think it's humorous to think about the two sides of the coin, because either the administration is really ignorant, is truly ignorant to what crypto really is, that you could make an error in a post, in a tweet, and then correct yourself by adding in what you and I and our listeners would think is very obvious. Like, how are you going to talk about this reserve then leave out Bitcoin, much less Ethereum? Or is it more that it's like everyone's in on it, and there's this list in front of President Trump, and Bitcoin's at the top, but there's no people to like extort, so he just forgets about that. Then Ethereum's next, but that's run by a Russian guy, so we don't want to talk about that. So that gets crossed out, and then it's just a whole list of people that he knows, and we're going to throw their coins in there because, like good politics, as we've seen, you often want to put a lot on the table so that when you then have your discussion, because you can't tweet on a Sunday night and then correct yourself all crazy and then not have well, what's next? Because then very quickly, and you hit me with this news just in that came out on Saturday, which was before the Sunday tweet. Hey, everyone, we're hosting our first ever crypto summit at the White House this Friday. I'm sure the timing of those got a little bit out of place. But look, if you can't put all that on the table and then have a discussion in order to walk back some of them, like, okay, well, after our discussion, maybe Cardano doesn't make sense. Maybe Ripple doesn't make sense. I like you, Andreessen. We'll keep Solana in there. And then Ethereum and Bitcoin, of course. Like, I'm almost wondering if this is one of those classic lay the whole 9-course meal, but then we're sorry, guys, we're only having soup and salad.
And not to be outdone, but the news today about the New York Stock Exchange changing rules to allow the Bitwise Doge ETF. The NYSE ARCA has filed paperwork that will enable the exchange to list the Bitwise Dogecoin ETF if approved by the SEC. So of the names you just outlined and of the coins and the projects that may or may not get included in the strategic reserve, here comes the memest of memes that started out as the meme coin, the Dogecoin, which has turned into the Department of Government Efficiency. Not to be outdone, Doge will get an ETF, and I then start to wonder, of the ones that are being sort of prepped here, the red carpet rolling out literally for the crypto summit this week for Andreessen Horowitz, for the guys from Ripple, for the Cardano teams. Doge is already in there, but do they all have ETFs in place already? Didn't those applications already get approved? The other ones anyway? So maybe here we are, maybe Doge. Why wouldn't the Dogecoin get included in the strategic reserve if it is in fact the utility of the coin to create this government efficiency? Whoa.
Now you've hit it. Now you've hit it, because what does Cardano not have? Well, they don't have an ETF. But Solana, I mean, they got futures, they got ETFs. Doge apparently can get an ETF. Maybe that's where you cut the line, because there's talk of like, well, what should the Department of Government Efficiency do to really make its mark to imprint itself into the hearts and minds of Americans and taxpayers everywhere? That we've heard the stories, talked about it last week or the week before. Well, the department would like to give $5,000 American dollars to every
Airdrop.
taxpayer. An airdrop. But now maybe it's that, well, we could think about giving people cash. Or remember, we still haven't gone into Fort Knox yet to see if anyone's stolen the gold. But maybe when we rebuild our digital asset strategic reserve, that we say, well, maybe the savings, the efficiencies gained in Doge should be put into the reserve and in Doge, because then we'll have a very clear view, which says that Doge, if there is a Doge component of the reserve, well, that's efficiencies from the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency. And then if there's Bitcoin, well, that's probably Michael Saylor related and strategic and not micro strategy, and that their company now called Strategy for MicroStrategy. Maybe there are different kinds of things that you put in the reserve that represent different buckets, if you will, of government
100%.
funds, and that's sort of like tiers. And then you wonder, well, my big wondering there is, look, you said we talked about Brian Armstrong. Let's get back to him just for 1 second. He's the one guy who was, by the way, vilified, I think, for many years, right? He was sued. The SEC said, okay, you can ring the bell. Coinbase is now on the stock market. Oh, but like literally the same day they ring the bell, they start suing them for their lending program, their lending DeFi protocols. They said that were illegal, all these things. And now all of those suits supposedly are being dropped. And they're saying, okay, Armstrong, go to Argentina, set up Coinbase, not Central America, Coinbase Argentina. And because, Miele, we like him, let's get him in here. He's doing his own rug pull. We talked about that last time. But Armstrong is now kind of wandering the earth like Caine from Kung Fu and spreading the gospel of crypto. But at the same time is going, hey, everybody, I know you can't hear me because I'm down here in Buenos Aires, but I don't know. The strategic reserve probably should only have Bitcoin, guys. I'm down here in Argentina, and it's really bad. Like all these currencies that aren't Bitcoin, it's really bad. It's killing the economy. They're like, oh, no, just stay an extra few months. We're having a crypto summit on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you caught the headlines. I was looking for the story here. That Brian Armstrong is going on a next marketing campaign with Coinbase, asking for the money back, showing the receipts of all the legal fees that they had to incur. You think about that. They've been under attack from the Securities Exchange Commission. They had to weather this crazy crypto
Inquisition.
Exactly. I mean, they were just being drilled despite having not done anything. There was just this enforcement through or regulation through enforcement, and they had to lawyer up, and they had to go to court, and they had to hire experts to navigate this stuff. And he's now basically going to Doge and saying, pull the receipts from the SEC, Elon, figure out how much money I had to pay at Coinbase to keep these guys off my back. If they're dropping the case, I want a refund. I want my money back so that I can go buy some more Bitcoin and be a part of the strategic reserve. Now, talk about the levels. I mean, you planted this seed months ago as we were talking about how these different currencies and projects would be used in government. I'll have to go back and pull that. But when we were talking about like Bitcoin being used in one level and Ethereum being used kind of at the banking level, and maybe Solana is used at the kind of enterprise level. And we were talking about like how there would be these tiers of how the projects get used to bring different business functions on chain. I think the same logic applies there when you're talking about this digital asset strategic reserve. And I think there's maybe even some rationale for why they've danced around not calling it just a Bitcoin strategic reserve. They've called it digital assets. There have been these tweets that talk about these human-owned projects that we know who can get invited to the White House, and they're creating the tiers. So maybe there is a full tilt Bitcoin strategic reserve, and the others sort of function as strategic stockpiles. We talk about that with other commodities in that way, things that we buy and we strategically stockpile them, whether that's, corn, rice, beans, whatever, like real commodities, or maybe it's Doge,
barrels
Solana,
of oil
or oil. Exactly. That it just becomes a different definition, a different tier of a quote strategic reserve. While meanwhile, the sovereign wealth fund. And I mean, it's fascinating as I'm like putting all these in air quotes. These are new phrases that have entered the conversation as we talk about new characters, new people. We give their names of who this entourage of people trying to figure out what crypto in the United States is going to look like. But we're talking about things like strategic wealth funds, or sovereign wealth funds, strategic reserves, Bitcoin strategic reserves. Like, it's a whole new vernacular that's getting created. And I think that's really where, again, to your point, that's where you put everything out on the table. You negotiate it during the Bitcoin summit week. You've already got the fixes in. I mean, let's go there. The fix is already in. So the FUD from Sunday, the up and down in the price action, it's not like it's getting decided today. It's being announced on Friday, and I have a real strange suspicion I know exactly what's going to happen when they announce that this is now a strategic part of of the United States financial system. And maybe more importantly, the headline that I've only now started to hear break through is that if we can create this sovereign wealth fund, if we can buy Bitcoin, if we can bring in these digital assets, that we can pay off the national debt. And we called it here, have you been involved with using Bitcoin to pay off the national debt? It's happening. And that narrative, when we get to budget time, is going to break through. I don't care which side of the aisle you sit on. I don't care who you voted for. That narrative, if this we'll just go get some old Bitcoin so we can pay off the national debt. Hell yeah, let's do it.
I mean, and that's the headline that we talked about. We'll have to go back and pull the title from whichever episode that was. I want to say that goes back more than a year. And because I know, our listeners know, if you are the current administration and you want to cement something into the history books that is unique and undeniable, and you want to continue to do that, you want to be the LeBron James of governments. LeBron James, famously, I'm a Laker fan for all those listening, will rise up and perform as if he's half of his age if there is a weird record on the line. Literally, it's how can I make more and more unique records? Can I pass the ball to my son in a game and he scores? Great. Can I win an in-game tournament sponsored by Saudi Arabia? Yes. Can I create the bubble in Florida and have big face coffee served by Jimmy Butler out of some hotel in Orlando? Yes. And still win? Yes. Yes. Okay. Look, the president went for the first time in the history of America to the Super Bowl. The president went ahead. I just heard recently, it was the first time a sitting president ever attended like the Daytona 500 or whatever that most recent NASCAR race was. Well, how about you're the first administration that reduces the American deficit to zero? And here's the beauty of the magic trick. All you have to do is say that you did it. Because if the strategic reserve has a whole bunch of currencies that you control because you know the people, and if someone's like, well, we needed 2.8 trillion, we only have 2.7 trillion, don't worry, we'll just make another 100 billion of Solana and then we'll give it to you. Okay, we got it, we're done. Open up Fort Knox. Is there any gold? No. Why? It doesn't matter. Look at these receipts. We have so much Cardano, and there's no more deficit. And the American dollar is now worth 10x to worth of what it was around the world. I mean, it's the kind of magic tricks that are about to happen that are, like you saying, it's going to when you start waving that golden carrot out in front of an administration like this. There's no end, and we're seeing it through the creation of the vernacular. We're seeing it through the creation of new financial products. Literally every single day, it's a new product. And then to kind of pull it back around to one thing we were talking about before is the kind of the blinding crassness, to use a very strange term, but like the blinding just rudeness of it all is that cryptocurrency, the ethos of all of this, is defined very simply: a way to transact between two people outside of any kind of centralized institution or bank, peer-to-peer transfer of value, which was the original idea of the Bitcoin white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. And where are we today? We are so far beyond that we have derivative upon derivatives, so that when billions come into the market, sometimes the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum goes down, because these guys have realized if we just wash money in and out of these ETFs and these futures and these different things, we can basically decide when and how to sell these actual assets at whatever price we want, which is how you can literally show on paper, and I'm not going to say Reaganomics level crazy, but it's like that. Like, oh, look, the deficit is zero. We should all be having a parade and celebrating, but everyone's going to be scratching their head wondering, how do is it true? Is it real?
The question to me, and I think I said this on the last episode, of you're watching this up and down in crypto. We've been talking about crypto, but on the other side of this coin, literally, is the layoffs, the reduction in forces, the Department of Government Efficiency coming through with a chainsaw and sending people home. That mass exodus from the workforce, then coupled with, do companies lose market value? I mean, does the traditional NASDAQ publicly traded technology company who loses its government contract, does it lose economic value? And there starts to be this decoupling, truly decoupling, of the American dollar from the digital dollar, from these cryptocurrencies, which will not be needing that economic value creation from a U.S. worker, from the business, the way publicly traded companies operate. If they lose their value, Bitcoin and Ethereum and these other cryptos could decouple, that the lines could start moving in the other direction. People's 401ks could go way down and crypto could go way up, and that the two may not move in the same pattern that they have always moved. That's a weird one to start to dig into, something to watch. I think it's a much bigger macro conversation, because we're talking about Bitcoin is at a global scale. Everything I just described of reduction in workforces and layoffs and Department of Government Efficiency, that's a U.S. problem. It may be happening globally, but the headlines, at least right now, and the biggest pain of what I think is coming is, are we headed into kind of the traditional definition of an economic recession while watching the government efficiency and the AI and the digital currencies go to Mars, soar past the moon and go all the way to Mars?
Yeah, and something that you and I have been talking about offline is this idea, that notion, which is there's a number of paradoxes at work, and that kind of rise of one economy and a falling of another is paradoxical, because we've never ever had that kind of a juxtaposition before. And the ethos we're trying to get back to, what I was saying, is like the ethos of Doge, for better or for worse, is actually in line with the idea of what blockchain represents. What is blockchain about? It's about transparency. Everyone should be able to see every transaction in the blockchain. So the idea of Doge, regardless of whether or not it came from a meme currency as a name, is, well, if we're going to make the government more efficient, we should put the government on chain, and then therefore everyone should be able to see with their own eyes the cutting and efficiencies and why they're so beneficial to the American people. You can send somebody a check for $5,000, but you got to explain why and how we got there. And the easiest way is to show, well, we're on chain. So similarly, we look at these different opportunities, like what's to say when the government is done being optimized, which of course it never will, but what's the next logical step? Well, big companies might start to get pressure from the American government. Doge might decide, well, we're gonna go tell our new pal Sundar Pichai at Google, we're gonna go tell our new pal Satya Nadella at Microsoft, we're gonna go tell Mr. Zuckerberg at Meta, hey, just like the government, we now need you guys to start to optimize. And we would like to see your optimizations on chain, because this is part of the ethos of its transparency, all these things. But there is definitely the vibe, and I think you and I know, there are going to be maneuvers of this government which are on chain, but are going to be obfuscated from the retail investor, from the American people. They're not going to want to show to every single American how much every government employee earns. They're not going to want to show that there's a certain number of things which might suddenly become very problematic to just make visible to everyone. So there's this paradox of the two things trying to come together. Is we're trying to bring ultimate efficiency and optimization, but we're still going to have to hide some stuff from you. So how do we reconcile those two things? And one of the things you opened with at the top of the show, which I thought was pretty interesting, is now these guys are saying, okay, maybe we can't just buy TikTok with money. Maybe we can't just pull investors in favors. Maybe we can't just write executive orders or whatever it is we're trying to do, create acts in Congress. Maybe we just need to bring TikTok on chain.
This to me, I love how you just got there, but all of a sudden, if you've got 100 million people displaced from their current work and you give them TikTok on chain to talk about whatever they were talking about, whatever brand of beer they're drinking, whatever restaurant they walked into, whatever car they're driving, whatever's in their environment that they're discussing, whatever book they're reading, music they're listening to, if it's on chain, there's economic value that can be created. And now are we starting to see what a pathway to universal basic income could look like? I mean, it sounds crazy, but if Alexis Ohanian succeeds at this acquisition of TikTok, because he's saying, I mean, this is the other important part to me, the narrative, the story that he's out there selling is give it to the American people. Put it in the sovereign wealth fund. We joked about it, but truly decentralize it, put it on chain. That means that you as a user, and I mean it like
as an agent of
the platform can own your data. You can make money. You can transact peer to peer. You can share content one way and extract value another way. And I made this call when I told you months ago that Mark Zuckerberg was hedging his bet on Threads built on top of Mastodon, a decentralized platform, because when that knock comes down the door, hey guys, hey Mr. Zuckerberg, these guys over here at TikTok are now on chain. Twitter now functions as an on-chain mechanism, peer-to-peer transactions. It is its own ecosystem, its own economic engine inside the app. We're going to need you to put that old Facebook on chain so we can keep track of all of the money coming in and out and who's doing what and who's buying from whom, and all those transactions get captured. Well, Zuckerberg's already got a plan, a method with which to deploy that across the entire Meta ecosystem that you haven't seen deployed yet. But damn, that's good. If they've been planning that and then all of a sudden TikTok becomes the first domino to fall.
Well, and look, and you called it. You get some flowers for this one, because to be able to say all of the crazy things that Zuckerberg said on that very public podcast, lambasting previous administrations, revealing, what I think if most American citizens were to hear that, and if it were 100% true, would be a little bit reviled by the idea that the government would just want to call the head of a social network and tell him or her to suppress content and to modify messaging. It sounds really like a censor kind of communist vibe, but to come out the way he did, all gully and getting ready to do his judo, clearly the plan was in place. Clearly he knew he is already about to be on chain, so that you can just make that announcement. Hey, we don't have content censors anymore. There are no more humans. Why? Because we're on chain and the community is not obfuscated. It is actually visible, transparent, and ready for the community to interact with, like you said, its own ecosystem, and an ecosystem that generates value, not just for the owners of the platform, not just for the government, they want to use the data, but every single individual is a creator. You want to talk about, so here's the headline. Here's my call. the acquisition of TikTok into the sovereign wealth fund or into Fort Knox or into whoever the influencer is whose pals bought it, it's going to create American jobs. And suddenly our unemployment numbers are just bottomed out to a zero asymptote. Because why? Because every single government employee who was let go from the Doge chainsawing is now being set up with an American government verified checkmarked TikTok account for them to go and start making money talking about the disciplines that they know and to help encourage other people who want to, apply for jobs in the government. Like, you could see this thing turning itself into the biggest pot of lemonade from the nastiest little raggedy tree of lemons.
And everything that you've just described sounds so positive and optimistic for us to get to this very optimistic view of, while there may seem to be blood in the streets and doom and gloom in the headlines, and hell, Trump literally used the phrase World War III in the Oval Office with Zelensky. Like, that's scary stuff. People losing their jobs. I always take a moment to pause about the reality of the workforce and what it means for Americans and real humans who are struggling. And yet you and I just painted this optimistic path that, to me, I sort of hope is the real end game, because that path, that optimistic path, does to me sound like a massive change in culture, a massive change in economic engines and how money flows, the idea of community and decentralization and the ethos of Web3 really coming through to the masses, people starting to understand that instead of being the product on these social networks, you can create the product and get paid for it. The content that you publish, every word that you share, every tweet, every Facebook post, it's entertaining hundreds of other people. It's keeping them on the platform. It's how the advertisers, sort of gain the attention that they're paying for. That network effect happening at scale is very exciting, but the pain to get there scares the hell out of me. And I just don't know how long it takes to bring all of that on chain and what happens in the meantime. It's not a clean cutover. It is going to be a transition. And when I talk about the decoupling of the real dollars from the digital dollars, you're talking about the decoupling of the physical economy from the digital economy, the real world from the metaverse, from the virtual world. And crazy little thread there is we're waiting for the release of Grand Theft Auto, where a lot of the assets are going to be on chain. And now all of a sudden you've got this digital world where you can go rob a bank at gunpoint and you can buy Nikes and they'll show up at your front door, all from the comfort of your living room.
Yeah, we can spend an entire show talking about some of the video game stuff and how that's all going to play out. Let's just hope that Rockstar can actually produce a physics engine that's on par with Fortnite, because if they don't, that right shoulder button aiming convention and hiding behind things is that's been played out since Gears of War. Anyway, that's just an inside.
On it for 10 years, so let's
pull this off. At a certain point, you might as well just license the Unreal Engine and call it a day. But just a final kind of thought on this as I was thinking about it as you were speaking. What kind of brought me back around is to this incredibly duplicitous narrative that we have, that we hear a version of, and like you said, the optimism, the excitement, right? If all of the news and all of the rumors, if all of that together works in these fun cycles, and it's selling a story about preserving American citizens' wealth, value, and future retirement, because on-chain is better than traditional products. If we're talking about removing jobs but creating even better jobs, if we're talking about all these things that are going to produce more value for just our country, then we can see how you could get the entire country behind that movement. The two economies, we talked about that little up and down of the play there, where if the virtual digital currency starts to outpace the real currency, that causes lots of questions about what is really de-dollarization. Do we have to start, as we already are trying to, make these digital currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum seem more American than they are? Do we need to take more control? We're already trying that. But what I think is really interesting, and I'll leave this on, I don't know if you saw this. I shot it to you maybe a day ago. But just out of nowhere, our friends at the IMF, okay? Now, for those listening, IMF, it's the International Monetary Fund. There's another player that's in that same world called the World Bank, which is its own. They're very similar. The IMF seems to be more international because there are so many countries represented. However, it's about percentage share in voting, and the United States holds the largest voting share as to what they do and they don't do. So what did the IMF recently just decide to go do? They decided to go down to none other than our president friend Bukele in El Salvador. Bukele in El Salvador is famous because he changed or added the Bitcoin as a national currency and uses the hydrovolcanic energy. This is water pouring onto live volcano lava to create steam to turn turbines to mine Bitcoin to start to enrich his country's coffers. The IMF just today, this is today, came down and said, hey, we want to ban the accumulation of Bitcoin for your public sector. We're okay with the government mining the Bitcoin like you guys have demonstrated, and we're okay with you getting that wealth, but we're not okay with your citizens as, quote, retail investors like you and me here in the States buying, selling Bitcoin, and came rolling in hard and talking about how we're going to do more funding, the classic moves. We're going to give you some more loans, all these memorandums, but like, just think about just the concept of that. There's some coalition of foreign governments who decide that they can just make an announcement on March 3rd that we're going to tell a foreign government and all of its people what to do. And that is, I feel like we're going to start to see this kind of disingenuous behavior where we, the American people, have all this talk about our rotunda and all of our best crypto projects and our strategic digital asset reserve, but we're going to go around the world just squeezing all these countries. Why? Because we don't want anyone else to own any Bitcoin. We want to make it impossible for any other human in the world. Now, governments will give you the yay or the nay, but other humans, 100% nay. You legit cannot buy it. And by the way, for the American people, we're going to keep making Bitcoin fly up and down, swing all crazy, and get you all nervous, and then tell you, oh, but don't worry about that. Your pal here at BlackRock or at Fidelity or at Wells Fargo or at US Bank, he has a product called an ETF for a future, and we will guarantee you returns at a perfect 8.5% year over year, just like your retirement plan used to be. And don't worry about it. You have a little piece of paper that says you have some Bitcoin. This is where I'm seeing it. It's I don't want to use bad words. We're going to do the world over real nasty to prevent them, the retail people, the 8.8 billion people in the world who aren't Americans. Sorry, crypto's not for you. Your governments, that's fine if you have a good deal with us, but we're going to control it by making it so you can't buy it. Well, this is what I'm seeing. This is bully.
Crypto, but it might just be Bitcoin. And I think that could be an important point because we got a lot of extra Cardano that we'd be happy to let our Argentinian citizens have, which is shitty. And I hear you. I think we're going to have to leave it there, sir. I am headed down to South by Southwest in Austin for the annual Film, Television, and Music Festival this weekend. I'll be there through the middle of next week, so we may miss a cycle in recording. I'm excited to see and hear boots on the ground there in Texas of what's happening. I'm actually going to be at the Texas State Capitol on Wednesday talking with senators about the economic boom that is happening in Texas right now as everything from clean energy to automobile manufacturing, to rockets, to chip manufacturing, everyone moving their headquarters to Texas. It'll be fascinating to report back and what I think all that means, not to mention the Texas Stock Exchange still there lingering in the background. We might get a centralized exchange where you'll be able to buy and sell all of those strategic digital assets at your favorite Texas stock exchange. I'll leave it there, sir. Any final thoughts?
I look forward to talking to you. I mean, again, after this the Friday crypto summit at the White House, we're gonna have notes from that'll carry over into Austin. I'm sure that the talk tracks will be aligned. So be listening to what we hear on Friday, and then let's see if we hear that echo when you're in Texas, and we'll pick it up when you get back.
Love it. Peace.
That's all the
Take
time we
care.
have for this episode of Off the Record, on the Rocks. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time for more news and all things crypto and Web3.